to Upstage Downstage, with him, Richard Platt, seated in the upper circle.
And him, Stephen Rees, typically seated in the cheap seat.
This is the Theatre Podcast, where we discuss productions we've seen,
Things we've liked,
and may not have liked,
giving our complete unprofessional
and non-biased opinions.
So grab a brew,
Take a seat,
and let's raise that curtain.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing The Crucible. We saw this production at Sheffield Crucible on the 23rd of March 2024. Arthur Miller's enduring masterpiece, based on the events of the infamous Salem witch trials, is directed by Anthony Lau. So Richard, what's it all about?
Fear and hysteria grip a feuding community as a battle between innocence and guilt exposes the very darkest corners of human nature. When a group of young girls are discovered dancing and chanting in the forest, they are accused of witchcraft. With the threat of execution hanging over them, the girls draw people of the town into a world of secrets, lies and manipulation, where their only goal is self-preservation.
But first, our post-show opinion!
I'd rather get crucified.
I wasn't spellbound with this production.
So, with all that said, let's
Set the scene!
So Richard, we are here to talk about The Crucible by Arthur Miller at The Crucible
In
in Sheffield. Now then, would you like to set the scene or describe the scene? There's as many words as you can possibly imagine to use.
Bear.
Mm-hmm. Now go on then, before you be too negative about it, just explain.
Okay, so in the Crucible itself, we went with the Crucible staging. It almost looked like they'd set it up for a snooker match, in the sense of a table in the middle of the room,
Which was the size of a
snooker table,
yeah,
with
or two of them together. Maybe.
security lights almost on little stands all the way around the actual the table,
Floodlights.
and and a beige carpet really, and what looked like a 3-tiered seating stand at the back of the stage with microphones and red chairs, like red chairs you'd see in a rehearsal plastic,
chairs,
like like you'd see in a
school.
in school, really, yeah.
And we had the actual imagery of the Crucible Theatre used within the production.
Yeah, so the signage outside the building was replicated into a slightly smaller style and the inside of the building. So it was. I feel like we're watching the Crucible in the Crucible.
Its namesake.
It's almost like we needed to keep being told it's the Crucible as well.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the set.
Yeah, there's not really much more I could say.
First impressions, I have to say, very underwhelming.
Yeah, totally.
I knew this was going to be a stylistic piece, and it would have. Well, it was definitely a struggle.
I think there's nowhere to hide when you do a staging like this, where there's literally nothing on stage, and it can set the tone in a good or bad way, really. Mm-hmm. And I think progressively we realised actually it just didn't evoke a time period or a positioning or a place. It actually left it quite confused, really.
Yeah, and I think that sums up pretty much how we both feel about this production. We can go on about the actual play and stuff a bit later on, but without beating around the bush, it very much left us feeling a bit.
There weren't any bushes.
Empty. No, well, they clearly didn't have a budget for that. So Act 2, they had they took the table awayeth, and they brought out these little
milk churns.
Milk churns on these flatbed trolleys, and they had about 3 or 4 of them, and probably about 18 milk churns of things. Well, just had flowers in the milk churns, to be honest, and that was to resemble a house.
It was a house and a farm field, or it was a bit of like.
It was vague in its setting because they had the characters move around it whilst retelling a story.
And bear in mind, the milk churns could be considered quite old world, but the trolleys that they were on were very much something you could go to Screwfix and buy now.
Exactly, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Now, I think before we go on any further, we've just got to say this right now then. So this was based on the Salem witch trials in Massachusetts between 1692 and 1693. And that's the time period we're led to believe we are in, because everyone's costumes are in the 17th century period piece there. So when we have that to contend with, and that's what we're going with, we're then going against it with the actual set pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've got the flatbed trolleys, which are modern times.
We've got plastic chairs from
the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Loads of microphones.
Loads of microphones everywhere. And there's a huge...
And then, it's like
there.
floodlights as well.
Floodlights.
On stage
So immediately, we're hit throughout the play with reminders that it's
confused.
It's distracting is what it is, because if you're there to take all the information in and enjoy the play, it's the details like that just makes this look like they're trying to do it stylistically, but it just looks like a rehearsal.
Well, let's also add to that the poster and the promotion of it very much shows a contemporary 50s look to the production, which is almost when Arthur Miller wrote it.
Yeah,
but you're led to believe that the Crucible's going to be set in a 50s style.
Yeah.
And then when you see modern day things, not 50s things, but then...
Whether you had the flat, I don't know about that being in...
No, but I think the thing is the fact that they're powder-coated metal trolleys, they're not something that you'd expect to have old world wheels or old... it's just... It almost feels like... I think something you said to me on the night was... It feels like we're watching a rehearsal.
Yeah.
Using what they've got around them to make those props.
Exactly,
rather than... These aren't what they're going to use, but this is what we're going to use for now.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that was very indicative for the whole show, actually. Nothing got any better. And it did sort of take you out of it slightly. I think throughout all of it, when they were performing, they were using these microphones as well. And that played a big role, because part of me was trying to work out why they needed to have the microphones. And... at certain points in the production, they'd speak certain lines into the microphone, and then the rest of the time they wouldn't need that. So therefore, for me, it felt like they were trying to highlight certain texts to say that these people are given voices for certain words, or there was a reason to it. But it just got to the point where all it was doing was making everything look messy. It was a distraction from the actual acting, because they had to try and unravel themselves from the wires. They had to make sure that they didn't trip over the wires. They had to make sure that the microphones were in the right place at the right time. And it just seemed...
It just felt like the point of focus was all over the place for me.
I think it comes down to the director's vision.
Yeah, and I think for me it frustrates me, because I know you haven't seen it yet, but Standing at the Sky's Edge was done by Sheffield, and they had microphones everywhere, but it works in that context. But I feel like, has the director of this seen that and saw we need to do that for this production? It's like, do something different. We don't need that production's not that long since it's been in the Crucible, and then we're replicating it. Yeah. It's like, don't just do it because somebody else has done it, or... And then the cables were just getting everywhere. They were getting in the way, and
they were a trip hazard. Not just the microphones being moved around, but also the floodlights that were on the floor as well. And one of the reverends did almost like knock one of the mics flying in the third act. But yeah.
I think nothing felt purposeful. It just felt like
this is going to sound like a really big insult here, but it felt like a university degrees, third year's production, trying to be edgy, trying to be new age, this is how they do it now.
This is new theatre. This is setting the standard for future productions.
Actually, it's not edgy. It's you detract from the actual script and the play. I mean, bearing in mind, I'll go into the play a little bit later on, but the concept of how they've set it out and everything, it's just a bit too stripped back.
Yeah.
For it to, so when you deplete when you strip everything back to the simplest form, like they're trying to do, like give them the word of mouth, so they'll give them a microphone to speak. When you start adding those elements back in again for that kind of reason, just to give it a different slant, you're sort of then stuck with having to do that through each scene. And then when they're walking around with these urns, churns full of flowers, and then putting them everywhere and then putting them back again, you're just moving things around on the stage just for something to do. You're not moving around with purpose or intent. And yes, it can give a bit of aesthetic performance if all you're doing is speaking, because let's be honest, these kind of plays are very speaky. They're very talking.
But I think it was, for me, it was like, I mean, I know we're jumping about a bit, but
they're very dialect heavy.
It's the aesthetics of this production over, you see a production, that's billed on the posters being quite 50s-esque. The costumes were nothing to do with the 50s. They also didn't match if they were aiming for a rehearsal standard, none of them were wearing almost their own civvy costumes. It was all, most of it was like almost smocks and very old school 17th century wear, and then you got the odd one in a suit, and it just felt confused. It was like, oh, what time period are we in?
Right, okay, so bear that in mind. I agree with you. So if they'd have stuck with the 50s, that would have made more sense.
Totally.
Because the 50s represented in America the McCarthy era.
Exactly.
Which is what, when Arthur Miller was writing the Salem Witch Trials, they did wonder if he was writing that for a particular reason.
Yeah, exactly.
To highlight that kind of point.
Yeah.
But in terms, it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Being on trial because you're associated with such and such,
different,
you've done such a thing. It's the same story.
Exactly.
Why didn't they just stick it in the 50s?
Exactly. They should have kept all of it in the 50s.
Well, they could have done, but they could have just played it out as if it was going on.
But also, what I also saw was moments where they could have used radio broadcasts or things to move the storyline along with recorded work that would have helped, with some of the announcements we saw, or with some of the things like the announced Act 1 or Act 2, or, if they'd have brought in some of the twists of the 50s elements, it would have almost brought it up to date in a way that was like this could happen now, a little bit like Handmaid's Tale, where modern day goes back into a very surreal 1700, like it goes back in time to the point where women are only there to make babies and they're all controlled and there's a hierarchy. I think it just didn't feel like you knew where it was. If they'd have had some twists in it that had made you feel focused on it, it would have been good. But I
wouldn't have had a radio broadcast if it was set in the 17th century.
No, but if you're going to set it in the 50s,
then yes.
But what I'm saying is that they could still have this underground world that's like that these people are being pulled away into, like these. It's about difference, isn't it? It's about difference.
When they're saying about the acts, is that actually scripted, or have they just added that?
No, they've just added that in.
Okay. So when they announce that it's an act, it's what I said on The Good Person of Szechuan.
Yeah.
It's like a Brechtian thing. It's the epic theatre. But that kind of thing is, when they say Act 1, what it means is that little section there is a play within itself.
Yeah.
And then the next one, that's a play within itself. So they break it up so it's stylized that way. And that's historicisation of the events. And that works for this. However, I don't believe that it was sort of also needed by doing it that way.
If the play doesn't know what it is to start with, then it makes it harder.
Well, they've made it in that way. So
Yeah.
you
They've
are
serialised
distant.
it almost. Yeah.
Yeah, it works for Brecht with how he does them. Now, I've not seen The Crucible before, but I've seen other plays by Arthur Miller. And if they were going to do a retelling of The Crucible, I wouldn't have done it like this.
No. I don't think they've gone far enough they've not twisted it enough. And I suppose what I mean by the radio broadcast or this, that and the other, they could have used recorded works, they could have used things within that brought it up to that era that made it feel different. So almost Orwellian, like, you know, it's almost like some of the announcements could have been made, or some of the courtroom stuff could have been done in such a way. I don't know. What I'm saying is, it's more.
I think the way
if you're going to take it differently. You know.
I think because they've stripped it back, they've utilised that epic theatre-esque thing on it to give the audience an information as to where they are in the play and what's going on.
Yeah.
And give them a time frame.
Because there isn't one on stage.
No, exactly, because there isn't one on stage, which is exactly the issue. Now, I've got no qualms with the acting and everything. However, it was a difficult watch.
It was.
Simply because you didn't know whereabouts everything was going on. Everyone was walking in and out of doors there were no doors, so we didn't know where they were. They were just coming down the steps of where they were.
And also the raised seating at the back, the raised platform. We knew it was going to come forward at some point because you could tell. There was nothing was a surprise. There was no elements of like, oh, this is definitely different. Or
I think if I wanted to watch The Crucible, I would have liked to have seen proper 17th century, either the buildings or bits. Not, I don't mean like a huge set.
No,
of things,
I know what you mean.
Things to represent the religion.
Yeah.
The places they're going to hang.
Yeah.
And the community as a whole. You know, a lot more things of that time period.
It just felt watered down, you know.
I think I think this is another play, or a production, I should say, that suffers from not knowing where its time frame is meant to be. Because I think I was right in saying it looked like a rehearsal.
I just feel like not enough research has gone into the actual...
How much did we pay for a ticket for these?
Too much, in my eyes.
So you're talking, what, 50 quid? Something like that?
Yeah, totally. Between
£50 for a couple of actors speaking on plastic chairs.
Yeah. And also health and safety issues when they're standing on piled chairs.
Yeah, you should not be able to do that. But how can they get away with it in theatre?
To put in height on stage, you know, and that's. I just feel like there's a lot of things that could have been done better. You know, the script is old and it is tedious. The script
is very tedious. Oh, should we go on? Yeah, let's go on to the.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the writing now a little bit, but I think, you know, staging of it helps improve that script if you can do that. But I don't think there's been enough time spent on creating the theatre that needed to go around it.
I don't think this was a good vision for me. Other people might have enjoyed it though. Might have saw through it. It just bored the living daylights out of me because I just couldn't focus on it. I couldn't care. And I think the biggest thing is it does come round to the writing, because when they are dialogue heavy with so much detail, I'm not saying that like it wasn't understandable, but it's another one that's just so long-winded. You know, I just wanted to shout out, get to the point. Because they're just going around in circles, all these little conversations, and just trying to work out like who said what and why did they say but you didn't mean this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth.
But I think as well, it's like
I think it's present of a lot of these like writers of that time period though.
And the thing is,
David Priestley's the same.
You know, from my perspective, they could have actually kept it in period costumes, because you've got the Amish community who live like that now.
Yeah.
You know, you could have still had the twinges of the 50s coming in and out with certain characters who are on the edges that actually switched it over between the two. But this just didn't feel like you were even going to go anywhere near it. It was like, it just didn't make this, nothing enhanced the script. Nothing, you know, the script just, it's a lot. I just think the writing's dated. And
well, obviously, it wouldn't be.
Yeah, but there's other scripts that have stood the test of time, and this one just, I don't feel it has. You know, because it's so specific and time time period. Unless you do something radical with it, the Salem witch trials have got to be the Salem witch trials from the 17th century. You've got to be it almost strips away from it any of the power of what the original was aimed at, and I think that's why I just like you say it's just like watching a rehearsal. It's
hard to get across it in an entertaining way and something a little bit different, and yes, it certainly was a little bit different, but it wasn't entertaining. That's the issue with this for me. I want to be transported back in the time of Massachusetts, 17th century, Salem witch trial. I want the set pieces, I want the costumes, I want everything there. I want to be dated down there for me to really be immersed in it, and I'm not. I wasn't immersed in anything. I was so far out of it.
Yeah,
that I was like I wasn't allowed in.
I certainly felt
and
disconnected.
I think that's how
with it.
It was made for you to view it from afar. Of like this is somebody else's like talking piece as well.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think there was an awful lot of choices made for the direction, where there was a lot of actors pacing around, trying to bring a bit of energy and drama into it, like the priest.
Yeah,
he was very energetic, moving about all the time, and I think everything laid on to the actors to move
and
for the sake of moving, just to give some energy and pace in there.
Yeah, and it's like the journeys from the back of the stage through over the top of the seating and stuff to show travelling and distance and stuff, Well,
we don't really need to see that.
No, and I don't really want to spend time watching the backstage the backstage sort of door open that would have been for big set pieces to be brought on. You just sat watching that open, and it didn't have the dramatic effect it needed,
A lot of people will review it about what the play actually means and stuff like that, but they're not necessarily going on what show we saw. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
How that play, that text, is delivered to the audience. So the director, just like the actors, are the conduit of the playwright.
And it's very easy to, like you say, it's very easy to look at this as well, it's Arthur Miller and it's the Crucible. You can't always touch it, and it's like, but you can.
Yeah, of course.
Because a good version of this is a good version of this. The bad version is, something that's confused and not
this.
Exactly. I mean, it's just chaos, not in a good way. Chaos can sometimes be really good on stage, but this just felt messy rather than.
If I wanted to learn anything, I'd watch a 10-minute YouTube video on the Salem witch trials.
Yeah,
I got more information from that than watching this.
Totally.
And I felt more engaged from like an animated thing about what happened to these people, like Sarah and everything.
Yeah.
Than I did about watching this play, because that's what the production of this gave me. The distance, the space away from it. It wasn't engaging. It was just a load of actors walking around shouting on and off in a microphone, pacing about on stage. Trying not to trip over the furniture. Or
I just felt it diluted the storyline, really, for me.
The thing is, in a way, you want to be concentrating on the dialogue.
Yeah.
Because that is what makes it important. But you want to be sort of like clever with a sleight of hand by furnishing that dialogue.
Yeah, definitely.
With something interesting going on. But how it was done with the microphones and the two huge tables, which they were on top of, hanging around the legs of, and getting frisky under, was just a bit. Yeah, I think I just summed it up. I just felt like I was watching a rehearsal in a school.
You did.
Moving on to our next segment, as we say, we're here for the drama.
Acting, props and costumes then, Richard, which we've sort of highlighted.
I mean, I can't discredit the acting. I mean, you could hear them, everything, volume was right, the energy levels were there. Mm-hmm. I don't know how they actually kept their energy levels up, because,
it was a very long play.
They must have felt like they were in something else compared to what we were watching, because they were very energetic and they did perform. Can't deny that side of it. Everybody projected, nobody missed anything.
A lot of powerful emotive acting going on as well. So there's a lot of levels from all of them as well.
Yeah,
and the costumes that Well, again, we talk about the costumes, but
I felt the costumes was very subdued, and they weren't all of a palette for a reason. I just think they were confused. For me, I think because the creative team hadn't decided where this was placed and what this production was about, it felt like rehearsal costumes. It felt like we've got a load of these old things in the back. Let's just put them on, and it'll do. You know,
yeah.
It didn't feel specific, because it was like the scene in the towards the end, in the final scene, they were wearing jogging bottoms and sweatshirts for being in prison, and it was like, but 1 minute we're wearing smocks and the next minute we're wearing jogging bottoms and sweatshirts. I'm like, I can't work this out.
Yeah, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, it's really doesn't know its perspective.
And at the very beginning, one of the guys had jeans on.
Yeah. I mean, and we're talking about props as well. You know, the opening scene where the priest, was it the priest, come out with the I don't know if it was the priest, but the guy that came, it was the priest that came out with a script in his hand.
Yeah.
And that's when you instantly thought, we're rehearsing.
No, the one in the with the jeans.
Yeah,
came
right
out
at the start.
Yeah, that wasn't the priest. That was it was Reverend Hale.
Yeah, Reverend Hale. Yeah, it was Reverend Hale came out with a script in his hand, and it just...
Yeah, that's right.
It just made you think that... Now I'm already confused, because why has he got a script in his hand? Why is he reading in?
Wearing jeans.
Is he reading in because we haven't got, somebody's not turned up, or is it just specifically done? And then you're like, oh, it's actually meant to be like that, but then the script never came out for the rest of the production, so why do it? And it was just...
And talking of props, there wasn't really much other than two huge, great big Bible books, and
microphones and chairs.
Microphones, chairs, and a load of flowers.
Milk churns.
Yeah. And that particular scene was annoying, going around taking all the... what was it? John Proctor, I think his name was.
Yeah, it was.
Ripping all the flowers out of the chairs and throwing them on the floor. No, he didn't do all of them. I think he had about 6 left.
Yeah.
And never got to do them.
No.
So that annoyed me. Oh dear, never mind. Well, I've got nothing else to add on this one, to be fair.
No. Technical.
Technical then.
Moving on to our next segment, as we say,
What the Tech is this?
I mean, there was nothing exciting. I mean, one thing I'd say is...
Just leave it there.
Above the stage there was 4 rows of fluorescent lights, fluorescent tubing, like we were at the Crucible to watch the snooker.
Yeah, did they not come down a little
They
bit?
came down at one point to bring the stage down, the same as the Crucible sign itself came down into the space.
And what was that reason for? That was when I was in jail.
But that's what confused it, though, because it was like, yet again, it's modern day equipment being brought in that didn't have any relevance to the time. But this is where it all started feeling a bit all over the place.
What,
and everything was,
No, it was at the start. It all went wrong.
Oh, yeah, well, all the way through. I think the thing is, yet again, it was just a lot of white light, a lot of stage light. And they did a lot of... The other bit that got me was they'd started lighting the audience a lot to almost bring us in. But then all that does is actually expose the production, and it feels like a big, vast, empty space sometimes. And it feels awkward.
So they bring us in by flashing light towards us.
Yeah.
But yet they tell us what act it is.
Yeah.
So they're distancing us.
Yeah, exactly.
Keeping us away. So,
and it also, when you're lit as an audience, it's a very fine line where it feels like this is a bit awkward now. You can see everybody, whereas actually we want to be watching the production. And then the technical nightmare of loads of microphones on stage, cables everywhere. It just looked a mess, to be honest. It didn't look purposeful. It just looked messy,
Well, they had one guy who was part of the ensemble. He was just trying to unpack everything from behind the sides.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you saw him just take out something from like a clear plastic bag.
Yeah, it was a specimen bag, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As in like a crime bag, and it just, and that was for the dolly or whatever it was. And the thing is,
Oh yeah, the doll.
the thing is with that, so you've dated it modern day because you've got a sample bag, a specimen bag from a court case or something. But then everybody's wearing smock. Everything just sort of, it was confused. I just,
Yeah. And any other technical thing? Was there not much music or?
Not really. Everything was done on the microphones. There wasn't really much in the way of sound effects to reinforce any part of positioning or where you were, really.
Yeah. And because when they were speaking in and out of the microphones, you weren't quite sure if sometimes the audio of the microphone had gone off. And
yeah, those levels didn't go
whenever
right.
they tried to silence someone, they just rip the cable out of the microphone.
Yeah, I know. And it just... But they were still mic'd up so you could hear them as well. So
Well, they all would have been anyway. But yeah, just the whole point of, like, taking someone's voice by just unplugging the microphone, it just felt a bit...
I can't say anymore. I don't think there's anything.
If you were to do this production, how would you do it?
That's a big question. Very differently. I'd pick the space and time it was meant to be in and stay with it and make sure that it felt right. And that might have, to be honest, that would have been the biggest part of this, actually setting it in the right time period first before I'd start, and then break it down following that, because don't decide on a poster that's going to give you the misleading look that it's going to be something contemporary and new when actually it's still set in the same time period. It's just,
If anything, I was expecting something like the Sanderson sisters.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? That time period, or something of that house or the nature of the
I was
woods.
also expecting something almost Stepford Wives, where it all felt a bit surreal, that everything's a bit...
Or for the 50s poster thing. Yeah.
But almost fixed in a time period, and it's all a bit, you're like unnerved almost.
Yeah.
But I got none of that. This was just, I felt, I just felt like it was going to be something it wasn't,
Yeah.
And now it's time for
Rewind, Rewatch.
Rewind, rewatch, Richard. What would you watch again?
I put the tape back in the box. Take it back to Blockbuster.
Yeah, for me, unfortunately... Well, not unfortunately. I mean, yes, I think I wasted 3 hours of my life. However, I've seen this play now, and I think it's going to be a very, very long time before I'd actually want to see it again.
Yeah.
Because I know what I'm going to get myself in for, and it's a little bit long-winded, and dare I say it, it's not for me.
Yeah.
The time period. Do you know what? If you want to watch something that's quite similar, Fellow Travellers.
Yeah.
That's set on, about the McCarthy era. That's very similar to the Salem Witch Trials and stuff like that. It's the same story, only well, it's about a gay love story anyway. But however, the witches, you just YouTube it. Watch a documentary. I'd rather watch a documentary than sit through 3 hours of this tribe.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean.
moving on to our final segment as we say, call this a show?
Summary.
I think I've said everything,
Yeah.
really. I can't say any more.
If you haven't already known what our summary will be, then it's not going to really improve, is it? This wasn't an enjoyable production.
No.
It was a big letdown for me. I think a lot of people in the audience were rolling their eyes, getting bored. There was a lot of people cringing and laughing, out of just sheer embarrassment. And fair enough, there might have been a lot of people in the audience who actually liked it and enjoyed it and paid attention to it. But I think there's got to be something more these days
definitely.
now. Because you're not just competing against other productions, you're also competing against other ways of getting the same story out there.
And I think for me, for example, you do the Crucible in the Crucible. I expect a lot.
That should be iconic.
And I got nowhere
This is
near.
a flop.
Yeah, exactly. It's just doesn't live up to the venue really.
No, it makes it a joke.
Yeah.
I'm left thinking, okay, so expensive tickets.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to see that be on the stage. Where is it? Where's the production?
Yeah, exactly.
Where's the budget?
They should be proud of this, and I just don't. I don't feel I got.
I think more effort and design went into the programme.
Yeah.
And the cover and the poster than it ever did for the production, unfortunately. That's where I think there's a disconnect, or there's two teams working here. One that did the show and one that worked on the marketing.
Yeah.
And there was definitely a disconnect
as
to where they were going here. Yeah, like you say, had they have put the tablecloth on the table and they'd have all been in the 50s gear, that would have made sense.
Of course it would.
But no, didn't even get that.
No, not at all.
Scores then, please, Richard, for The Crucible. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a thrilling, chilling, spellbinding production, and 1 being a tedious, laborious, insufferable production. What's it going to be?
I'm going to give this a 3.
I'm going to give this a 2.
So, what sound effect will you be choosing from the following? A complete train wreck? Tumbleweed? An audible shrug of the shoulders? A slow clap? A pleasant applause? Or a standing ovation? What will it be?
Mine's tumbleweed.
Mine's going to be a flat line. So there we are. That's our discussion of The Crucible. We hope you found it insightful.
If not, entertaining.
Stay tuned as we bring you more of our thoughts
And opinions.
on many theatrical delights in future episodes.
Just not this one again. If you'd like to get in touch, email us at upstagedownsstagepod@gmail.com. You can always join in the chat to share with us your views of a production.
Also, make sure to follow, share, like and subscribe to all our channels so you get every episode the second it's released. And we hope you join us again for another instalment of Upstage Downstage.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing The Crucible. We saw this production at Sheffield Crucible on the something of March 2024. When was it?
You said you got the date.
Richard, I've been lying to you all this time.
I'm just saying, just how funny. Me going, yeah, we saw this production on 23rd of March. Like in the middle. Hey, my voice just...
We saw this production at Sheffield Crucible. We saw this production at Sheffield Crucible on the
23rd of March
2024. Arthur Miller's enduring masterpiece, based on the events of the infamous Salem witch trial. Based on the events of the infamous Salem witch trials, is directed by Anthony Lau. So, Richard, what's it all about?
This production was pointless. It was over 3 hours and a waste of my life. Fear and hysteria grip a feuding community as battle between Fear and hysteria grip a feuding community as a battle between innocence and guilt exposes the very darkest corners of human nature. When a group of with the threat of execution and
So with all that said, let's...
Almost like the 50s mixed with the craft and mixed, like it just felt like if you're going to do it, it's like the Salem sisters have come back, like almost like the Sanderson, almost like Hocus Pocus mixed with the 50s, and, it almost felt like, but we got none of that.
No.
You got none of that, like,
Never mind. Oh, you're naughty.